The Galactic Council chamber on Nexus Station had never been so crowded. Representatives from hundreds of worlds packed the massive amphitheater, their voices creating a buzz of excitement and fear. News of the human colony had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. War Commander Zethmore of the hegemony of Voss stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he spoke. His species was known for their military strength and their belief that order must be maintained at all costs. These humans represent a clear threat to galactic stability, he declared, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. They possess technology that surpasses our own, yet they remain completely outside Council oversight. This cannot be allowed to continue. Murmurs of agreement came from several sections of the chamber, but there were also voices of disagreement. The galaxy was divided on what to do about the humans. Ambassador Krixtall of the Traders Federation stood to speak. With respect, War Commander, these humans have shown no hostile intentions. In fact, they've been remarkably welcoming to our investigators. Perhaps we should consider them as potential allies rather than threats. Potential allies? Zethmore's voice boomed. They've been hiding from us for 3 centuries. They've developed weapons technology in secret. How can we trust beings who have deceived us for so long? In a quiet corner of the chamber, Kang Wu-jin listened to the debate with growing concern. He had arrived at Nexus Station just 2 days ago, sent by the human colony to represent their interests. It was the first time any human had set foot in the galactic capital. Kang Wu-jin was 41 years old, with graying hair and calm eyes that missed nothing. He had been chosen as Earth's diplomatic envoy because of his ability to remain calm under pressure and his skill at understanding different perspectives. The Council recognizes the human representative, announced Chancellor Vexral, the ancient being who presided over Council sessions. Kang Wu-jin walked slowly to the speaking platform, aware that hundreds of alien eyes were watching his every move. He had studied galactic politics for months preparing for this moment. Honored members of the Galactic Council, he began, his voice clear and steady. I am Kang Wu-jin, speaking for the human colony in the Kepler 442 system. We appreciate the opportunity to address your concerns. Address our concerns? Zethmore interrupted. What about our concern that you've been spying on us for decades? What about our concern that you possess technology that could destabilize the entire galactic order? Kang Wu-jin nodded respectfully. I understand your concerns, War Commander. Let me try to explain our perspective. He activated a holographic display that showed the Kepler 442 system. 300 years ago, our ancestors were lost explorers who found an empty system far from any inhabited worlds. They were stranded, alone, and faced with a simple choice: adapt and survive or die. The display showed the transformation of the system over time, from dead worlds to thriving colonies. We learned about galactic civilization by listening to your communications. We studied your languages, your customs, and your laws. But we also learned about your wars, your conflicts, and your tendency to fear what you don't understand. Zethmore's voice grew angry. So, you decided to hide from us? We decided to be careful, Kang Wu-jin replied calmly. We wanted to be ready for contact, to be able to contribute positively to galactic civilization, rather than becoming another source of conflict. Ambassador Yelnara of the Scientific Consortium spoke up. Your technology could benefit all of us. Why not share your discoveries freely? We're willing to share, Kang Wu-jin said, but we've learned that technology without wisdom can be dangerous. We want to make sure any sharing is done thoughtfully, with consideration for the consequences. This statement caused an uproar in the chamber. Many representatives shouted questions and accusations. Zethmore's voice rose above the others. You dare to suggest that we lack wisdom? That you, a hidden colony of primitives, are somehow more advanced than civilizations that have existed for thousands of years? Kang Wu-jin waited for the noise to die down before responding. I'm suggesting that different experiences lead to different kinds of wisdom. We've learned things that you might find useful, just as you have knowledge that could benefit us. Enough of this diplomatic nonsense, Zethmore declared. The facts are simple. The humans possess advanced weapons technology and refuse to submit to proper oversight. They represent a clear and present danger to galactic security. Chancellor Vexral called for order as the chamber erupted again. Representatives argued loudly, some supporting the war commander's position, others opposing it. Jung Hyejin, who had been sitting quietly in the observation gallery, made notes on a small device. She was the human colony's intelligence officer, and her job was to monitor galactic communications and gather information about potential threats. She had been tracking the political situation on Nexus Station for weeks. The debate continued for hours. Some species called for immediate investigation and regulation of the human colony. Others suggested establishing trade relationships and scientific exchanges. A few, led by Zethmore, argued for military action if the humans refused to comply with council demands. Finally, Chancellor Vexral called for a formal resolution. After much argument, the council agreed on a compromise that satisfied no one completely. The humans will be given 30 standard days to agree to the following terms, the Chancellor announced. First, they will submit to a complete inspection of their technology and military capabilities. Second, they will relocate their population to designated worlds within council territory where they can be properly monitored. Third, they will share all technological developments with the council for proper evaluation and distribution. And if they refuse? Asked Ambassador Crixtall. Zethmore stood again, his voice cold and threatening. If they refuse, the hegemony of Voss will lead a joint military force to enforce council authority. We cannot allow rogue elements to threaten galactic security. Kang Woo-jin listened to the ultimatum without showing emotion. He had expected something like this. The galaxy's established powers were afraid of change, afraid of losing their positions of authority. I will carry your message to my people, he said formally. But I should warn you that humans don't respond well to threats. That sounds like a threat in return, Zethmore said dangerously. It's not a threat, Kang Woo-jin replied. It's just information about human nature. We prefer cooperation to coercion. As the council session ended, Jung Hyejin joined Kang Woo-jin in a private meeting room. Her expression was troubled. The military buildup has already started, she reported quietly. Zethmore has been contacting allied species for months, building support for military action. He was planning this even before the council debate. How large a force is he assembling? Kang Woo-jin asked. At least 10,000 ships, possibly more. Representatives from 40 different species have agreed to contribute vessels. Kang Woo-jin sighed. And our response? Shin Dong-hun is preparing defensive plans, but he's worried. We've never faced anything like this before. Back on New Seoul, the colony's leaders gathered to discuss the council's ultimatum. Lee Jun, now showing his age but still sharp and decisive, listened as Kang Woo-jin reported on the negotiations. So they want us to give up everything we've built and become refugees on their worlds, Kim Dae-ho summarized. That's essentially correct, Kang Woo-jin confirmed. And if we refuse? War. The room was quiet for a long moment. These people had spent their entire lives building something new and beautiful. The idea of abandoning it was almost unthinkable. What do you recommend? Lee Jun asked. Kang Woo-jin looked around at the faces of his friends and colleagues. I recommend we politely decline their offer. Park Min-ji smiled grimly. And then what? Then we show them what humans can really do. Dr. Velthak of the Centaurian Collective was not impressed. The arrogant scientist had arrived with the second wave of investigators, bringing with him the most advanced analysis equipment in the galaxy. He was determined to prove that the human achievements were somehow fake or exaggerated. Primitive materials, crude construction methods, and obvious design flaws, he announced loudly as he examined a human cargo ship. I don't understand why everyone is so excited about these people. Han Min-soo, the shipyard foreman, watched quietly as Velthak ran his instruments over the ship's hull. Several other humans had gathered to watch, including Lim Soo-jin and Ori. Jae-hyun, the hull plating is made from at least 6 different alloys, Velthak continued. Any engineer knows that mixing metals like this creates weak points where the different materials meet. Does it? Han Minsu asked politely. Of course it does, Velthak snapped. Basic materials science. These joints should fail under any significant stress. Interesting, Oh Jae-hyun said thoughtfully. We've never had problems with joint failure. Maybe we should run some tests to see what you mean. Velthak waved dismissively. I don't need to run tests. The theory is clear. What happened next would be talked about throughout the galaxy for years to come. Oh Jae-hyun suggested they take the ship for a test flight, just to demonstrate its capabilities. Velthak agreed, confident that his predictions would be proven correct. The ship was a simple cargo vessel, about the size of a Galactic Council patrol craft. It looked like it had been built from spare parts, with hull sections that were clearly different colors and materials welded together in patterns that seemed almost random. This is the Star Chaser, Han Minsu explained as they boarded. We built her about 30 years ago. She's not our fastest ship, but she's reliable. The interior was just as mismatched as the exterior. Seats from different manufacturers, control panels that looked like they came from a dozen different ships, and displays that used various technologies all working together somehow. Velthak pulled out his portable scanner and began taking readings. The power systems are completely incompatible, he muttered. Fusion reactor from Earth technology, power distribution using Altarian crystals, and navigation systems that look like they were copied from Centaurian designs. We had to work with what we could find, Lim Soo-jin said as she took the pilot's seat. Our ancestors salvaged parts from dozens of different ships over the years. It shouldn't work, Velthak insisted. The power frequencies are all wrong. The computer systems can't possibly communicate with each other. Maybe we should start the engines, Oh Jae-hyun suggested with a smile. Lim Soo-jin began the startup sequence. The sounds that came from the ship were unlike anything Velthak had heard before. Instead of the smooth hum of a properly designed vessel, there were clicks, whirs, and musical tones that seemed to create a complex harmony. Those are diagnostic sounds, Oh Jae-hyun explained, seeing Velthak's confusion. Each system plays a different tone to let us know it's working properly. When everything sounds right, we know the ship is ready. The Star Chaser lifted off from the shipyard and accelerated toward open space. Velthak watched his instruments in growing amazement. According to his readings, the ship was performing far beyond what its design should allow. Your acceleration curve is impossible, he said, staring at his displays. You're pulling more thrust from those engines than they're rated for. Are we? Lim Soo-jin asked. We just set them to give us the acceleration we need. I didn't know. They had ratings. Of course they have ratings, Velthak sputtered. Maximum safe operating parameters. If you exceed them, the engines will fail. These engines have been running like this for 30 years, Han Minsu pointed out. If they were going to fail, wouldn't they have done it by now? Velthak had no answer for that. His instruments showed that the engines were indeed operating far above their supposed maximum output, but they showed no signs of stress or wear. Let's test the faster-than-light drive, Oh Jae-hyun suggested. Absolutely not, Velthak said quickly. FTL jumps with improperly configured systems can tear a ship apart. We make FTL jumps all the time, Lim Soo-jin said. The ship was designed for it. Before Velthak could object further, she engaged the drive. The Star Chaser slipped into faster-than-light travel with barely a vibration. Velthak's instruments went crazy, showing readings that couldn't possibly be correct. We're traveling at warp factor 12, he whispered. That's faster than any ship in the Galactic Council fleet. Is that fast? Han Minsu asked. We mostly use our ships for cargo runs between planets, so we just set them to get us where we need to go quickly. For the next hour, Velthak ran every test he could think of. The results were always the same. The human ship outperformed his instrument's ability to measure, using technology that his education told him couldn't work. When they returned to the shipyard, Velthak was quiet and thoughtful. He asked to examine more ships, then the shipyard's construction facilities, then the manufacturing centers that produced the components. What he found challenged everything he thought he knew about engineering and physics. The humans had developed techniques for making incompatible technologies work together. They created stronger materials by combining weaker ones in ways that galactic science said should make them even weaker. They built systems that were more than the sum of their parts. How? He finally asked Oh Jae-hyun. How do you make these things work? Oh Jae-hyun thought for a moment. We listen to what the materials want to do instead of forcing them to do what we think they should do. That doesn't make sense. Materials don't want anything, don't they? Oh Jae-hyun led him to a fabrication area where workers were joining two different types of metal. Watch what happens when we try to force them together the way your textbooks say we should. He demonstrated the standard welding technique that was taught throughout the galaxy. The joint looked perfect, but when they tested it, it failed exactly where the two metals met. Now watch what happens when we let the metals tell us how they want to be joined. The human worker examined the metals carefully, running her hands over their surfaces and even listening to the sounds they made when tapped. Then she began joining them using a technique that looked completely wrong to Velthak. She varied the temperature, changed the welding speed, and added materials that shouldn't have been necessary. When she finished, the joint looked rough and irregular, but when they tested it, it was stronger than either of the original metals. She's reading the materials, Oh Jae-hyun explained, learning what they need to work together instead of fighting each other. Velthak spent the next several days studying human construction techniques. He watched workers who could somehow sense when a machine was about to fail, just by listening to its sounds. He saw engineers who designed systems by feel, creating elegant solutions to problems that galactic science said had no solutions. You don't follow the rules, he said to Han Min-soo on his last day at the shipyard. What rules? Han Min-soo asked. The laws of physics, the principles of engineering, the foundations of materials science. Han Min-soo looked puzzled. We follow the laws of physics. We just found out that the laws are more flexible than most people think. Physics isn't flexible, Velthak protested. Physical laws are absolute. Are they? Oh Jae-hyun joined the conversation. Or are they just the best explanations anyone has come up with so far? Velthak realized that this was the heart of the mystery. The humans had approached technology without preconceptions about what was possible or impossible. When something didn't work, they assumed they hadn't found the right approach yet, not that it couldn't be done. We had to learn differently, Lim Soo-jin explained. Our ancestors were stranded here with limited resources and broken equipment. They couldn't afford to believe that anything was impossible, because impossible meant death. As Velthak prepared to return to his ship, he looked around at the bustling shipyard one more time. Humans were building vessels that outperformed anything in the galaxy, using principles that galactic civilization had never discovered. What else can you do? He asked quietly. Han Min-soo smiled. We don't know yet. We're still figuring it out. That, Velthak realized, might be the most terrifying answer of all. The transport ship descended through the atmosphere of the planet the humans called New Sol. Admiral Thexvar pressed his face to the window, watching impossible sights pass below. Cities that seemed to float in the clouds were connected to ground settlements by massive tubes. Rivers had been redirected to flow in perfect geometric patterns. Mountains had been carved into terraced farms that stretched as far as the eye could see. This is wrong, muttered Dr. Velkron, the fleet's science officer. None of this should be possible. Park Minji, who was piloting their transport, laughed. You keep saying that. What do you mean? Atmospheric processors of this scale require enormous amounts of energy, Velkron explained. The weather control systems alone should need the power output of a small star. And the ecological balance. You have plants and animals from dozens of worlds living together. It should create chaos. It did create chaos at first, Park Minji admitted. Took us about 20 years to work out all the problems. But once we figured out how to make everything work together, it became much easier. The transport landed in what looked like a garden, but Thexvar could see it was actually a spaceport. Humans moved cargo using machines that looked like they had been built from spare parts, but they worked smoothly and efficiently. Lee Jun was waiting for them with several other humans. He gestured to a tall man with broad shoulders and a calm expression. This is Kim Dae-ho, our military commander, Lee Jun said, and this is Choi Yuna, our chief scientist. Choi Yuna was a young woman with bright eyes and an enthusiastic smile. She stepped forward eagerly. "We have so many questions about galactic science," she said. "We've been working on our own theories for centuries, but we'd love to compare notes." Thexvar noticed that all the humans seemed excited rather than nervous about meeting aliens. Most species were at least somewhat afraid during first contact. "Aren't you concerned about our presence here?" he asked. Kim Deho shrugged. "Why should we be? You seem friendly enough. And honestly, we've been preparing for this day for a long time." They boarded what looked like a train made from salvaged parts. As it began moving, Thexvar realized it wasn't traveling on tracks. It was floating above the ground, held up by some kind of magnetic field. "How are you powering this?" Velcron asked, pulling out his scanner. "Fusion reactors," Choi Yuna replied. "We have about 3,000 of them scattered around the planet. Each one is built a little differently depending on what materials we had available when we built it." Velcron stared at his scanner. "These energy readings, they're impossible. Your reactors are producing 3 times more power than they should be able to." "Are they?" Choi Yuna looked genuinely curious. "We just kept improving the design until they worked well enough for what we needed." The train carried them through a landscape that defied everything Thexvar knew about planetary development. They passed through forests where trees from different worlds grew side by side, their roots connected by some kind of fungal network that seemed to be sharing nutrients between species that had evolved on different planets. They saw vast lakes, where earth fish swam alongside creatures from the ocean worlds of the Zephyr system. The water was so clean it was almost transparent, despite supporting ecosystems that should have been chemically incompatible. "How do you manage the biochemistry?" Velcron asked, his voice strained. "These species should poison each other." "We use buffer organisms," explained a new voice. A middle-aged man approached them as they stopped at the next station. He was introduced as Bei Taewon, the agricultural director. "Buffer organisms?" Velcron repeated. "Small creatures and plants that process toxins and adjust chemical balances," Bei Taewon explained. "We bred them specifically for this purpose. They live in the soil and water, constantly adjusting the environment so everything can coexist." "You bred new life forms?" Thexvar asked, alarmed. Creating new species was forbidden by galactic law due to the dangers involved. "We had to," Bei Taewon said simply. "Our ancestors brought seeds and animals from Earth, but the soil here couldn't support Earth life. So we created organisms that could make the soil work for everyone." They continued through the city, which was unlike anything in the known galaxy. Buildings seemed to grow from the ground like plants, their walls covered in living vegetation that helped regulate temperature and air quality. Transportation systems moved people and goods efficiently, but they used principles that Galactic Council engineers insisted were impossible. "Your gravity management," Velcron said, checking his instruments again. "You've somehow made artificial gravity that feels completely natural. Our best technology creates gravity fields that are noticeably different from planetary gravity." Woman working on a nearby construction project looked up. She was introduced as Song Jiwon, an atmospheric engineer. "Artificial gravity?" she asked, confused. "We're not creating gravity, we're just adjusting the planet's natural field." "That's impossible," Velcron stated flatly. "Gravitational fields can't be adjusted. They're fundamental properties of matter." "Song." Jiwon looked puzzled. "But they change all the time. When we mined out the asteroid belt, the planet's gravity field shifted slightly, so we built compensators to keep it stable. Then we realized we could use the same technology to create localized changes. They visited the planet's weather control center, where another human, Yoon Kyung-soo, showed them a system that shouldn't have existed. Massive atmospheric processors worked in harmony with biological systems to create perfect weather patterns across the entire planet. "We don't fight the weather," Yoon Kyung-soo explained. "We work with it. The processors nudge storm systems where we want them to go, and the biological systems help maintain the patterns. This is a planet-wide ecosystem management system," Velcron whispered to Thexvar. "The theoretical framework for this didn't exist until 10 years ago, and no one has actually built one. We built our first one about 200 years ago. Yun Kyungsu said, overhearing. It was much simpler then, but the basic principles were the same. As the day progressed, Texvar saw more impossible things. Mines that extracted resources without damaging the environment. Factories that produced no waste because everything was recycled into something useful. Energy systems that somehow captured and used forms of power that galactic science said didn't exist. But the most shocking revelation came when they visited the orbital shipyard above the third planet. The facility was enormous, clearly capable of building vessels the size of Galactic Council battleships, but it looked like it had been constructed by welding together thousands of smaller pieces. We started building ships about a century ago, explained Han Minsu, the shipyard foreman. Mostly just cargo vessels and system defense ships at first, but we've been improving the designs constantly. Velkran scanned one of the human ships with his instruments. After several minutes, he turned to Thexvar with a look of complete bewilderment. Sir, he whispered. According to these readings, their ships are faster and more efficient than ours, and they're built from materials that shouldn't be able to handle the stress of faster-than-light travel. Lim Sujin, a young woman who was introduced as a propulsion specialist, overheard him. Oh, the materials aren't the important part, she said cheerfully. It's how you put them together. We developed techniques for making different materials work as if they were one unified substance. That's impossible, Velkran said automatically. There's that word again, Park Minji laughed. You seem to use it a lot. Oh Jae-hyun, the systems integration expert, joined the conversation. We learned early on that if something seems impossible, it usually just means you need to approach the problem differently. Thexvar stared at the bustling shipyard, where humans were building vessels that outperformed the best ships in the galaxy, using techniques that galactic science said couldn't work. These people had spent 3 centuries alone in space, cut off from galactic civilization. Instead of dying out or remaining primitive, they had somehow leapfrogged ahead of species that had been developing technology for thousands of years. How had they done it? And what did it mean for the rest of the galaxy? Admiral Thexvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the data scrolling across his screens. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep confusion among his people. The Altarian had been exploring space for over 200 years, but he had never seen anything like this. Sir, his communications officer called out, her voice shaking. We're getting responses to our scans. There are people living in this system. That's impossible, Texvar replied, his voice calm despite his confusion. Our records show no authorized colonies in the Kepler 442 system. It's too far from any major trade routes. The fleet had stumbled upon the system by accident. They were mapping the outer edges of known space when their sensors picked up something strange, energy signatures that shouldn't exist, artificial structures where there should only be empty planets. Sir, they're human, the officer said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thexvar's middle eye widened. Humans were one of the newer species in the galactic community. They had only made contact 50 years ago, and everyone knew they were still struggling with basic space travel. Their home world of Earth was thousands of light years away from this system. Are you certain? He asked. Yes, sir. The transmission is in their language. They're asking us to identify ourselves. Thexvar looked at the main screen, which showed a blue and green planet surrounded by what looked like orbital stations. But these weren't like any stations he had seen before. They seemed to be made from different materials welded together like someone had built them from spare parts. Open a channel, he ordered. A face appeared on the screen. It was definitely human, pale skin, dark hair, and 2 eyes instead of the 3 that most species had. The human looked calm, almost as if he had been expecting them. Welcome to the Kepler 442 system, the human said in accented galactic standard. My name is Lee Jun. I'm the administrator of this colony. We've been wondering when someone would finally find us. Thexvar struggled to find words. How long have you been here? About 300 years, Lee Jun replied with a slight smile. My ancestors arrived here in 2387. We've been building our home ever since. 300 years, Thexvar repeated. But that would mean you arrived before humans even had faster-than-light travel. That's correct, Li Jun said. Our ship was part of an early exploration mission from Earth. We got lost, found this place, and decided to stay. It seemed like a good spot to build something new. Thexvar looked around his bridge. His crew was staring at the screen with the same confusion he felt. Administrator Li Jun, with respect, our records show that humans barely had the technology to reach their own moon 300 years ago. Your records might not tell the whole story, Li Jun said politely. Would you like to come down and see what we've built? I think you'll find it interesting. The Admiral hesitated. First contact situations were always delicate, but this was unlike anything in the manual. A lost human colony that had somehow survived for 3 centuries in deep space? It should have been impossible. We would be honored to visit, Thexvar said finally. Excellent, we'll guide your ships to our main orbital platform. Fair warning, though, our docking systems might look a bit different from what you're used to. As the channel closed, Thexvar turned to his science officer. Velkron, run every scan you can on this system. I want to know everything. Velkron's fingers danced over his controls. After a few minutes, he looked up with confusion written across his scaled face. Sir, the readings don't make sense. What do you mean? This system has 5 planets. According to our scans, all 5 are habitable. They have breathable atmospheres, stable weather patterns, and what appears to be complex ecosystems. Thexvar felt his stomach drop. Terraforming was one of the most difficult things any species could attempt. It required massive resources, advanced technology, and usually took hundreds of years even with help from multiple species. Are you saying they terraformed 5 planets? It looks that way, sir. But that's not all. They've built structures throughout the system, mining stations in the asteroid belt, solar collectors near the star, and what looks like a shipyard orbiting the 3rd planet. Thexvar stared at the data streaming across his screens. The humans had built an entire civilization in this forgotten corner of space. How had they done it? And why had no one in the galaxy known about it? Sir, his communications officer called out again. We're being guided to the docking platform now. Through the main viewer, Thexvar could see the platform growing larger as they approached. It was huge, easily the size of a small moon, but it looked like it had been built in sections over many years. Different parts were made from different materials, and it looked more like a city that had grown naturally, rather than something that had been planned. The docking clamps are unusual, his pilot reported, but they seem to work fine. As the ship settled into the dock, Thexvar prepared to meet these impossible humans. He selected a small team to accompany him, his security chief, science officer, and diplomatic attaché. The airlock opened, and they stepped into a corridor that looked nothing like the sterile hallways of Galactic Council stations. The walls were covered in what looked like growing plants, and the air smelled fresh and clean. Humans waited to greet them, dressed in simple clothes that looked practical rather than formal. Li Jun stepped forward, a woman at his side. She was smaller than him, with short black hair and intelligent eyes. Admiral Thexvar, welcome to New Sol Station, Li Jun said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. This is Park Minji, our chief engineer. She built most of what you see here. Park Minji smiled and spoke in clear galactic standard. We're excited to finally meet other people from the galaxy. We've been listening to your communications for decades, learning about your civilizations. You've been listening to our communications? Thexvar asked. Of course, she replied. How else could we learn your languages and customs? We wanted to be ready for when someone finally found us. As they walked through the station, Thexvar saw things that shouldn't have been possible. Fusion reactors that looked like they had been built from spare parts but were somehow more efficient than anything in the galaxy. Agricultural sections where plants from dozens of worlds grew together in perfect harmony. Workshops where humans were building technology that looked primitive, but clearly worked better than it should. How did you do all this? He asked. Park Minji shrugged. We had to. When our ancestors got stranded here, they had 2 choices: die or figure out how to live. They chose to live, and we've been improving on their work ever since. They entered a large viewing area that looked out over the planet below. Thexvar could see cities connected by what looked like transport tubes, vast farms, and forests that seemed to stretch across entire continents. The planet was almost dead when we arrived, Li Jun explained. Too cold, no atmosphere worth breathing, and the soil was mostly rock. It took us about 50 years to get it livable and another century to make it beautiful. 50 years, Thexvar's science officer whispered. Sir, terraforming should take at least 300 years, even with the best technology. We didn't know it was supposed to take that long, Park Minji said, apparently having overheard. We just started working and kept going until it was done. Thexvar stared out at the impossible planet below. These humans had done what entire galactic civilizations struggled to accomplish, using nothing but determination and creativity. How had they managed it? And more importantly, what else were they capable of? The largest military fleet in galactic history hung in space at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. 10,000 warships from 40 different species created a wall of metal and energy that stretched across millions of kilometers. War Commander Zethmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator, and felt satisfied with the show of force. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're detecting the human fleet. How many ships? Zethmore asked. 200, sir. Zethmore laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. 200 ships against 10,000? These humans are either very brave or very stupid. Through the main viewer, the human fleet became visible. Zethmore's laughter died in his throat. The human ships looked like they had been built in someone's backyard. They were different sizes, different designs, and appeared to be made from salvaged parts welded together in random patterns. Sir, his tactical officer said uncertainly, I'm having trouble identifying their ship classes. None of them match any known designs. It doesn't matter, Zethmore declared. Numbers are numbers. Begin the advance. The massive galactic fleet moved forward, maintaining perfect formation. It was an impressive sight. Thousands of sleek warships moving in coordinated groups, their weapons powered and ready. Admiral Ryu Sangmin watched the approaching fleet from the bridge of his flagship, the New Dawn. At 48, he was one of the youngest fleet commanders in human history, chosen for his tactical brilliance and his ability to think creatively under pressure. Well, he said to his crew, they certainly brought a lot of friends. Quan Nari, his tactical coordinator, was only 29, but had been studying galactic military doctrine for years. She looked calm as she monitored the enemy fleet's movements. They're using Standard Council Formation 7, she reported. Heavy ships in front, support vessels in the middle, fast attack craft on the flanks. Just like the textbooks, Ryu Sangmin agreed. Moon Ji-hoon, are you ready with the electronic warfare packages? Moon Ji-hoon, the fleet's electronic warfare specialist, nodded from his position at the communications console. All systems are ready, Admiral. Their command and control networks are exactly like we studied. This should be interesting. The human fleet waited motionless as the galactic force approached. To outside observers, it looked like a small group of cobbled-together ships facing certain destruction against overwhelming odds. Zethmore opened a communication channel to the human fleet. This is War Commander Zethmore of the Hegemony of Voss. You are ordered to surrender immediately or face the consequences. Ryu Sangmin's face appeared on the screen. He looked relaxed, almost casual. Good morning, War Commander. I'm Admiral Ryu Sangmin. I'm afraid we can't surrender today. We have other plans. Other plans? Zethmore sputtered. You're outnumbered 50-1. Yes, that does seem unfair, Ryu Sangmin agreed thoughtfully. Perhaps some of your ships would like to go home. Zethmore's face turned darker. You have one final chance to surrender. Thank you for the offer, Ryu Sangmin replied politely, but we'll have to decline. Moon Ji-hoon, if you please. What happened next would be studied in military academies throughout the galaxy for centuries. Moon Ji-hoon activated a device that looked like it had been built from spare computer parts and old communication equipment. Every screen in the galactic fleet went dark. What's happening? Zethmore shouted as his bridge systems failed one by one. Sir, his communications officer called out, all our networks are down. We've lost contact with the fleet. That's impossible. Our communication systems are hardened against electronic warfare. Throughout the galactic fleet, confusion reigned. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation suddenly found themselves blind and deaf. Their computers crashed and their weapon systems offline. Now would be good, Ryu Sangmin said calmly. The human fleet moved, but they didn't move like any military force in galactic history. Instead of charging forward in formation, each ship seemed to dance through space following paths that looked random, but somehow avoided every defensive position the galactic fleet had prepared. How are they moving like that? Sethmore demanded, as he watched human ships slip between his forces like ghosts. Sir, their movement patterns don't match any known tactical doctrine, his tactical officer replied. It's like they're not following any plan at all. But there was a plan. Quan Nari had spent years studying how galactic fleets moved and fought. She had identified patterns and habits that had become ingrained over thousands of years of warfare. The human fleet was exploiting every blind spot and weakness in galactic military thinking. Target that ship, Sethmore ordered, pointing at a human vessel that seemed to be made from the hull of an old cargo ship. His weapons officer tried to comply, but the targeting system couldn't lock onto the human ship. It was moving in ways that the computer couldn't predict, changing direction and speed in patterns that seemed to defy physics. Their ships are too maneuverable, the weapons officer reported. They're pulling acceleration that should tear them apart. Then use area weapons. Saturate the space around them. The galactic fleet began firing, filling space with energy beams and explosive projectiles. It was an impressive display of firepower that should have destroyed anything in its path. But the human ships seemed to dance between the attacks, sliding through gaps in the barrage that shouldn't have existed. They moved like they knew where every shot would be before it was fired. Admiral, Quan Nari reported, we're ready to begin the next phase. Proceed, Ryu Sangmin replied. The human ships suddenly changed from defensive to offensive, but instead of using conventional weapons, they did something unexpected. Each ship fired what looked like small probes toward the galactic fleet. What are those? Sethmore asked as the probes approached his ships. Unknown, sir. They're too small to be torpedoes. The probes attached themselves to the hulls of the galactic ships and began to work. Within minutes, the massive warships found their own weapons turning against them. Turrets rotated to fire on their sister ships. Missiles launched back toward. Their own launch tubes and defensive systems began attacking their own vessels. They've taken control of our weapons, someone shouted. How is that possible? Sethmore demanded. Moon Ji-hoon's voice came over the communication system, which had somehow been restored. Your security protocols are very standardized, he explained cheerfully. Once we figured out how they worked, it was just a matter of convincing your computers that we were authorized users. Chaos spread through the galactic fleet as ships found themselves under attack from their own weapons. Captains ordered their crews to shut down all systems rather than risk being destroyed by their own vessels. Sir, Sethmore's tactical officer reported quietly, we've lost effective combat capability. Over half our ships have been forced to power down their weapons to prevent fratricide. Sethmore stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His massive fleet, the pride of 40 different civilizations, had been neutralized by 200 human ships that looked like they belonged in a scrapyard. This is impossible, he whispered. There's that word again, came Ryu Sangmin's voice, over the communication system. You know, War Commander, you might want to consider updating your tactical manuals. These formations worked well against opponents who thought the same way you do. But they're not very effective against people who approach warfare differently. What do you want? Sethmore asked, his voice defeated. We want to go home, Ryu Sangmin replied. We want to tend our gardens, build our ships, and live our lives in peace. We never wanted a war. Then why resist the Council's authority? Because the Council's authority would mean giving up everything we've worked for. We built something good here, War Commander. We're not going to let anyone take it away from us, no matter how many ships they bring. Over the next few hours, the galactic fleet began to withdraw. Some ships left immediately, their captains unwilling to continue a fight they couldn't win. Others stayed longer, trying to understand what had happened to them. Sethmore was among the last to leave. As his flagship prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel, he opened one final communication channel to the human fleet. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is," Ryu Sangmin replied calmly. "You came here to force us to submit or destroy us. You failed to do either. There's nothing left to fight about." As the galactic fleet disappeared into faster-than-light travel, the human fleet remained in formation for a few more hours. They wanted to make sure their visitors were really gone. "Well," Quan Nari said finally, "that was easier than expected, was it?" Ryu Sangmin asked. "We just showed the entire galaxy that their military doctrine is obsolete and their technology is vulnerable. I suspect the real challenges are just beginning." He was right. Within days, the news of the human victory would spread throughout the galaxy, changing everything. 1 year had passed since the day that changed everything. The galaxy was a different place now, and nowhere was that more evident than in the bustling spaceport of New Sol. Ships from dozens of worlds crowded the orbital platforms, their crews, eager to trade, learn, and experience the miracle that was human space. What had once been a hidden colony was now one of the most visited systems in the galaxy. Nam Yunji stood at the observation deck of the main trade station, watching cargo ships from the Traders Federation unload goods while taking on human-made products. As the newly appointed trade commissioner, she had been working non-stop for months to establish commerce agreements with species throughout the galaxy. "The Altarians want to place another order for our fusion reactors," her assistant reported. "They're offering twice the standard rate," Nam Yunji smiled. "Tell them we appreciate the offer, but we'll stick to fair market prices. We're not trying to exploit anyone." This attitude had surprised many galactic traders, who were used to aggressive negotiations and price manipulation. The humans seemed more interested in building long-term relationships than maximizing short-term profits. A communication alert sounded, and Nam Yunji activated the display. The face of Ambassador Krixtal from the Traders Federation appeared on the screen. "Commissioner Nam," Krixtal said warmly, "I have wonderful news. The Zephyrian Ocean worlds want to join our cooperative trade agreement. That brings our total membership to over 200 worlds." The cooperative trade agreement was something new in galactic commerce. Instead of competing against each other, member worlds shared resources, technology, and knowledge for mutual benefit. It was based on principles the humans had developed during their centuries of isolation. "That's excellent news," Nam Yunji replied. "We'll need to expand the coordination center again." After ending the call, she walked through the trade station's corridors. What she saw would have been impossible just a year ago. Humans worked alongside beings from dozens of different species, sharing techniques and solving problems together. In one section, human engineers were teaching Centaurian scientists how to improve the efficiency of their manufacturing processes. In another area, Altarian artists were collaborating with human designers to create new forms of aesthetic expression. "Nam Yunji," a familiar voice called. She turned to see Seo Minho approaching. As cultural exchange director, he had been organizing the constant stream of visitors who came to learn about human society. "How are our guests today?" she asked. "Amazed as usual," Seo Minho replied with a grin. "We have a delegation from the scientific consortium studying our educational methods, and a group of military officers from 6 different species, trying to understand our defensive strategies." The military visitors were perhaps the most interesting development. After the defeat of Zethmore's fleet, military leaders throughout the galaxy had realized that everything they thought they knew about warfare was outdated. They came to study human tactics, hoping to modernize their own forces. "Any problems?" Nam Yunji asked. "The usual confusion about how we make decisions," Seo Minho said. "They keep asking who's in charge, and they don't understand when we tell them that everyone is." This was indeed confusing to many galactic civilizations, which were typically organized as strict hierarchies. Human society was based on cooperation and consensus, with leadership roles that changed depending on the situation and expertise needed. They walked to the main conference center, where today's session was being led by Yang Yuzhong, the research coordinator. She was presenting the results of a joint study on asteroid mining techniques to a mixed audience of humans and aliens. The key insight, Zhang Yuzhong was explaining, is that we don't try to force the asteroids to give us what we want. Instead, we study each asteroid individually and extract what it wants to give us. A hegemony engineer raised one of his forearms. I don't understand. How can an asteroid want anything? Every asteroid is different, Zhang Yuzhong replied patiently. Different composition, different structure, different history. If we try to use the same extraction method on all asteroids, we waste resources and damage valuable materials. But if we adapt our methods to each asteroid's unique properties, we get better results with less effort. This philosophy, adapting to circumstances rather than imposing rigid solutions, had become central to human success. It was being adopted by civilizations throughout the galaxy, leading to improvements in everything from agriculture to space travel. After the presentation, Nam Yunji made her way to the residential section of the station. She wanted to check on one of their most important visitors. Dr. Velthak sat in the human-designed quarters, surrounded by research notes and half-built devices. The proud Centaurian scientist had requested permission to stay and study human methods for an extended period. Dr. Velthak, Nam Yunji said as she entered. How is your research progressing? Velthak looked up from a device that appeared to be made from components that shouldn't work together. Frustrating and enlightening in equal measure, he admitted. I've been trying to understand how human engineering principles can be applied to conventional technology. Any success? Some, Velthak said, gesturing to the device. This is a power cell I built using human construction methods. It's producing 30% more energy than it should be able to, but I still don't fully understand why. Nam Yunji examined the device, which looked like a collection of random parts somehow working in harmony. What's your theory? I think it has to do with emergent properties, Velthak said thoughtfully. When humans combine different technologies, they create interactions that weren't planned, but somehow enhance the overall performance. It's like the components are learning to work together. This was indeed one of the secrets of human technology. Instead of designing rigid systems, humans created flexible frameworks that could adapt and improve over time. Nam Yunji left Velthak to his experiments and headed to her favorite spot on the station, a garden that had been built in one of the ISO observation domes. Here plants from dozens of worlds grew together in impossible harmony, creating an ecosystem that was more beautiful and productive than anything found in nature. Li Jun was sitting on a bench in the garden, watching children play among the alien flowers. Now in his 70s, the former colony administrator had stepped down from formal leadership, but remained an important advisor and symbol of human achievement. Beautiful day, Nam Yunji said as she joined him on the bench. Every day is beautiful when you're watching the future grow, Li Jun replied, nodding toward the children. Some were human. Others were the offspring of the alien visitors who had decided to stay and become part of the community. Do you ever regret how things turned out? Nam Yunji asked. We've gone from a hidden colony to the center of galactic attention in just 1 year. Li Jun was quiet for a moment, watching a human child teach an Altarian youngster how to make paper airplanes. I think our ancestors would be proud, he said finally. They came here to build something new, something better than what they left behind. We've done that. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. Nam Yunji activated her personal communicator and saw the face of Chancellor Vexral from the Galactic Council. Commissioner Nam, the Chancellor said, I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Chancellor. How can I help you? The Council has been discussing the changes that have occurred throughout the galaxy since we discovered your people. We would like to invite a human delegation to address the full Council about establishing a new framework for interspecies cooperation. Nam Yunji exchanged glances with Li Jun, who nodded encouragingly. We would be honored to participate, she replied. Excellent. I should mention that War Commander Zethmore has also requested permission to address the Council. He wants to present a formal apology for his actions and to propose new military cooperation protocols based on human defensive strategies. This was surprising news. Zethmore had been conspicuously absent from galactic politics since his defeat. at Kepler 442. After ending the call, Nam Yunji and Li Jun sat in comfortable silence, watching the garden around them. The ecosystem represented everything the humans had achieved, different elements working together to create something greater than the sum of their parts. "What do you think comes next?" Nam Yunji asked. Li Jun smiled. "Whatever we decide to, build together." As the day shift ended, Nam Yunji made her way back to her quarters. Through the observation windows, she could see the lights of New Sol spread across the planet below, connected by transport tubes to cities on the other continents. In orbit around the other planets of the system, she could see the lights of other human settlements, each one unique but all part of the same community. But now there were also lights that represented something new, settlements where humans lived and worked alongside beings from other worlds, creating hybrid communities that were pioneering new ways of living together. The galaxy had indeed changed. The rigid hierarchies and competitive relationships that had dominated interstellar civilization for thousands of years were giving way to something more flexible, more cooperative, and more hopeful. And at the center of it all was a small group of humans who had started with nothing but determination and the willingness to